Good afternoon. We will begin this afternoon with the Refuge and Bodhicitta prayer. O sanje chedan soge chonam la chancho pardo dane chapsum che dage jin soge besanam je Drola penjir sanje drobar sho sange chedan soge chonam la chancho pardo dane jabsum je dake jin soge besanam di Drola penjir sanje drobar sho sange chedan soge chonam la chancho pardo dane chapsum je dage jen soge be sunam je drola penjir Sanje drobar jo Sanje tamje dewa tan dewe judan nembar jurji Donga dan donga judan drawar jurji Donga mebe dewa tamba Dan Mendral Jurji Nyedin Shadan Nitan Dralve Tanyon Shembola Neba Jurji. The Dharma Expanse Palace of Akanishta is the essence of all Buddhas of the three times who shows me directly in my mind is Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious exalted Guru. Please bless me and all sentient beings that our minds become the Dharma. Please bless us that the Dharma become the path. Please bless us that the path dispel confusion. Please bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. Now please think to yourselves that we need to bring all of our mothers, all sentient beings who are as limitless as space, to the state of completely perfect Buddhahood. And for that reason, we must practice the Dharma. In order to practice the Dharma, we need to have certainty, and certainty comes from listening and contemplation. And so think to yourself that you are listening for this reason, to bring all sentient beings to Buddhahood, and in this way, with the motivation of bodhicitta. The Dharma that we are listening to is the verses on the Treasury of Abhidharma by Vasubandhu, as explained by the Ninth Karmapa Wangchuk Dorje in his commentary Youthful Play. Of the 8 areas or chapters of this text, we are discussing the 4th area, the teachings on karma. And among the teachings on karma, we have at first the description of how all worlds arise from karma, the understanding of karma, and then the presentation of synonyms as an overview. And then we are discussing the second of these, the understanding of karma, which had a brief section identifying karma, the volitional karma, the intended karma having 2 parts, the intended karma of body and of speech. And following that, there was a section on the presentation of karma according to the Great Exposition School. And then the 3rd section of the understanding on the understanding karma is the presentation of karma as explained in the sutras. And so we have completed the first 2 sections. We are talking about the presentation of karma as explained in the sutras. The presentation of karma explained in the sutras has 4 topics. The first of these is the classifying karma in terms of cause and result. The second is teaching the many enumerations of karma. The third is which karma has how many results. And the fourth is other presentations of karma. So we have finished the first, the classifying karma in terms of cause and result, and we are talking about the second, the discussing other enumerations of karma. The other enumerations of karma has describing karma in terms of function and in terms of karmic paths in particular. So we have completed the discussion on describing karma, karma in terms of its functions. And so now we're talking about the karmic paths, the 10 karmic paths in particular. And that has an overview and an explanation, and so we are in the explanation. Now, of the 4 sections of the explanation, we have completed the first 3, the classifications of perceptible and imperceptible. And then the second would be the 3 virtuous and non-virtuous roots. The third was teaching the 3 completing factors, and so we are in the midst of talking about the 10, teaching the individual karmas. And so we began this section yesterday. So teaching the individual karmas has 4 parts, the characteristics of each karma. The second is how many can simultaneously engage volition. The third is which karmas wanderers have how many karmic paths, and the fourth is teaching the results of the karmic paths. So we're still in the first, teaching the characteristics of each karma, which has 2 parts, identifying each one individually, and then explaining wrong view in particular. And so here, in terms of identifying them individually, there are 3 sections. There's karma of body, 4 sections, karma of body, karma of speech, karma of mind, and the distinction between karma and karmic paths. So we've been discussing, yesterday we began with the karma of body. We discussed the first 2 types, taking life and taking that which is not given. And so now we have come to the section on sexual misconduct. So sexual misconduct, this is on page 348 of the book or the PDF. It is verse 74 of the text. So if you're looking at the ebook, search for verse 74 or 74AB in the 4th chapter. And so sexual misconduct says, the root text says, to lie with one who shouldn't be lain with, 4 kinds of sexual misconduct. Now, if you look at the Tibetan and the Sanskrit, literally it says to go with one who shouldn't be gone with, but in English we wouldn't understand that necessarily in the same way. But trying to find a kind of a delicate way to say it, but communicate the meaning. I tried with lying. That's kind of a old-fashioned way of saying it, and I better be old-fashioned. 4 kinds of sexual misconduct. So to lie with someone who should not be lain with and so forth are the 4 types of sexual misconduct. So there are 4 types. The first one is lying with someone you shouldn't lie with, right? So that is lying with someone who should not be lain with. And then the wrong part of the body, in the wrong place, and at the wrong time. So those are the 4 types. Basically, wrong person, wrong orifice, wrong place, wrong time. So the first is someone who's been taken as another's spouse, and so forth. Excuse me. So the and so forth means basically we're saying, in general, we're talking about other people's partners, but this also includes other people's children, or your own children, or your parents. Basically, people you shouldn't be lying with. That one's, I think, fairly simple to understand. In other texts, it sometimes talks about how this means like you should have like 7, further than 7 links away. So like you to your parents is like 1 link. You to your siblings is like 1 up to your parents and then down 2 to your siblings. Your first cousin, your nieces and nephews would be your 3rd link, and the first cousins would be 4 links. So basically what this is saying is, don't sleep with anyone closer, a second cousin or closer, essentially is what it's saying. If we put it in more Western sort of terms. But they're saying 7 links. And I think actually that gives a different variety of ways you could look at it, probably some sort of grandnieces, I don't know. Anyway, so no incest, no children, no other people's partners, no parents. That's basically what it's saying. So that is the first one. The second one is the mouth, anus, and so forth. And I'm trying to figure out what Wangchuk Dorje meant by "and so forth," but basically that's otherwise. The Sanskrit texts just say the mouth and anus. The third is in the open or near stupas and so forth, near temples, places where you can be seen in public, basically. So having sexual intercourse in public. And the fourth is with pregnant or nursing mothers. Now, the reason not with pregnant women is because it's said to cause pain to the fetus. So that's the reason for that. And with nursing mothers, the problem is that if the mother then gets pregnant, then her milk might dry up, and that'll be harmful to the child, and so forth. Right? Another aspect of the wrong time. So the pregnant and nursing mothers means people who are at the wrong time, not necessarily the wrong. It doesn't mean wrong time of day. It means like they're at the wrong period. So pregnant and nursing are wrong periods, but also with people who are like taking the fasting vows or the Mahayana Sojang vows for a day. So the person who sleeps with someone who is doing that, who is taking the vow, the person who has taken the vow and sleeps with someone else is breaking their vow. And the person who sleeps with them is committing sexual misconduct. Now, the person who's breaking their vow might also be committing sexual misconduct. I don't know. So it's kind of, anyway, that kind of builds up. So here, part of the way this is described in the commentaries really has to do with ancient Indian society and the way the familial structures were done. Especially when describing who you shouldn't be, who is someone that you shouldn't be sleeping with. When we look at it in terms of modern mores, we have a very different society and a very different way of doing it. And there are people who are, in ancient Sanskrit, in ancient Indian society, there wouldn't have been piles of single people in their 20s and 30s. They'd have all been married, mostly. Almost all married. Probably a few not, but mostly. So, bringing it into our current society, it's a very difficult question of what actually does it mean in terms of our current society. And then there are also people who say that this is primarily societal, and so therefore we should just do it according to our current morality. And there's a good argument to be made for that. On the other hand, this also includes things, the definition of sexual misconduct includes things that probably were just as attractive to do back 2,600 years ago as they are to do now, and that were listed as sexual misconduct even if you do them with your own partner. And so so how do we balance it? And so it's a difficult question to actually say what exactly is it. But I think that a general rule is that if you're talking about sexual activity with a committed partner, that's probably okay. But here it's not saying that, it's saying that certain types of sexual activity are concluded no matter what, no matter whom you do them with. And so that is an interesting question we have to consider. The basic thing we have to remember is that there are many things that we enjoy that are pleasurable that are the wrong karmic paths. And so really what you have to look at is what is your motivation when you're doing them. Are you motivated by greed or lust, hatred or aversion, or delusion? And if you're motivated by one of those, then it's going to be a non-virtue no matter what. Whether it then also becomes a karmic path, one of the 10 non-virtues, is a different matter. But we can see that the things that people enjoy doing that are the karmic paths, such as fishing and hunting, people enjoy it. It's they get out in the outdoors, they find it meditative, and whatever especially with fishing, people talk about it as a very peaceful experience. So they get enjoyment out of it. And so the fact that it's enjoyable does not necessarily mean that, it does not necessarily make it not one of the non-virtues. But this is a difficult issue. And so it's something that needs to be considered. And I'm certainly not in a position to make any great judgments about what is or not in terms of current society. Karma of speech. So that completes the karma of the body, and so now we're on karma of speech. And this is 4 points, or 4, now there's lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, and idle chatter. So lying has 2 points. So the first is the actual, saying, what actually is a lie? What is the characteristic of a lie? To say one, so this is the actual, is to say one thing while thinking another when clearly understood is lying. Here, kind of a linguistic thing. When you look at the Tibetan, it's interesting. It says "dushi shen gyurpe," sagargayargya shabji gyura gyur. Or sometimes it has a bangunju, bao sagargayargya shabji gyura gyur. Dushi shen gyurpe. So that is actually in Tibetan. It's an active verb to change someone's thinking. So that way you could interpret as being to change, someone already thinks what's right, and then to change their thought, you say something different. So that's one way you could interpret it according to the Tibetan. And one of the translations, Ian Cochrane's translation of the ornament of the Abhidharma, basically translates it in that way. So that's one way to understand it. In the Sanskrit, it says anyatha samgina. So anyatha means otherwise. That's a shindu. That'd be in Tibetan. It's a shindu, right? And then samgina. So samgya is the word for conceptions, ideas. It's the third skanda, samgya. So here, so in the Sanskrit, there's a similar word that means to make someone else know or to make someone else think that way, but this looks in the dictionary to me as if this is the word as to have the thought. And so the translations that are come from the Sanskrit, the translations made from Louis de Vallée-Poussin's French translation, say basically how I've translated it here, in order to, while you're thinking, knowing one thing, but you're saying something else. So this is an issue that I don't feel is resolved in terms of when I go through and revise this translation. This is something that I'm going to do a little bit more research into, exactly what it means. The Yashomitra does not really explain it. He doesn't gloss this particular sense. Obviously, it seemed clear enough to everyone who's speaking Sanskrit, so he didn't bother to gloss it, even though he glossed other things that seemed clear to when you look at them in Tibetan. So why he chose not to gloss this and chose to gloss other things is sometimes strange. But that being so, the main point is that here you know something, and you're saying something other than what you know. So to say one thing while thinking another about the subject that is being spoken of, when the meaning is clearly understood, is lying. So here, that's the first thing, is that you're saying something that's other than what you know or what you think. And the other is that it's the meaning is understood. I think they're both a little bit of difficult things. Here, Wangchuk Dorje doesn't really go through it. If the words are not understood, it becomes merely idle chatter. For example, if you were to go up and tell a lie to someone in a language that they don't understand, then it doesn't change it. So that kind of makes it sound sort of like making the other one think differently. Then it's just idle chatter. It's an interesting area. So this is why I have to think about this a little bit more. At any rate, so we've got, but there's that point. There's also description in the auto commentary and also in Yashomitra that talks about how when you say that the other is clearly understood, actually can be understood as meaning someone who is able to understand. Not necessarily that they do understand, but that they are able to understand, which means that they have learned the language, they understand that language, and that they are capable of hearing. They're not deaf, or they don't have some problem that prevents them from hearing. So they can hear and they know the language. That's what so that means. You're saying it to someone. So if you are lying to someone in Swahili and they speak Swahili, then it works as a lie. If you're lying to them in Swahili but they don't speak Swahili, then it isn't a lie. Okay? You can substitute any language. I'm just picking Swahili out of the top of my head. Probably because I don't speak it, actually. That's why. So when we're talking about lying here, basically what it says in the sutras, it's when you haven't seen something and you say, I saw it. When you have not heard and you say, I heard. When you have not known something, you say, I know, or I knew, right? Or if you have not seen something, saying, I saw it. If you have not heard something, saying, I heard it. If you have not known something, to say, I know it. Right? So basically, you haven't seen something and you say, I saw it. Like, one that comes up, one that's most important for us as practitioners, is when we're talking about things like levels of experience and understanding. I have had experiences of bliss. I've had realization of emptiness. Now, this comes in kind of two different phases. They're the people who think they have had experiences of, or realization. They think, I have realized the impermanence of all phenomena. But they're actually just kidding themselves. They haven't really, they have some sort of an understanding, maybe some certainty, but they haven't really realized it yet, because that's a little bit higher level. The story where this one comes from is there were two monks, two bhikkhus at the time of the Buddha, who went off to go meditating. They meditated, their meditation was great. And they both said to each other, I've become an arhat. And the other said, I have too. We've become arhats. Ah, how wonderful. And then they decided, we need to go see the Buddha and tell him that we've become arhats. And they walk down and they're going through the town, arhats, and they see all these beautiful women and they start to feel desire. And they look at each other, I'm not an arhat after all. And then they think, oh no, did we tell a lie about having supreme human qualities and lose our vows? So they went to the Buddha, not to say I'm an arhat, to say, but we told lies. And now did we lose our vows? We didn't want to, but it happened. And the Buddha said, no, if you are if you're saying something untrue out of self-deluded pride, that does not count as a... So if you are saying, I realized impermanence, and you are just not with it, and don't understand, don't really, if you think you have, but you haven't really, then you merely have self-deluded pride and you haven't actually told a lie. But it's more dangerous the other way around when you say, I have had realizations of impermanence. I have had realization of this. I have seen the nature of my mind. Actually, seeing the nature of your mind is really difficult. And at first, we have a conceptual idea of what the nature... This is what Gyaltsab Rinpoche and many other masters say. First, we have a conceptual idea, including Mingyur Rinpoche. You first have a conceptual idea of the nature of your mind. You think you've seen it, but you've only had a conceptual idea. But you say, I've seen it, because it's still a pretty astounding experience. And then, as you train under the guidance of a qualified guru, you get to a point where you actually see the nature of your mind. You say, oh, I didn't really see it before. Now I do. So, what this means is, now at that point, if you tell people, you think that you've seen the nature of mind, but you've only seen a conceptual idea. If you tell people, oh, I've seen the nature of my mind, you're probably operating under what we call the self-deluded pride. You haven't really seen it. You've got a pretty good experience. It's on the path, but it's not there yet. But on the other hand, you might say that knowing that you haven't seen it, if you know, I haven't seen the nature of my mind, I haven't done this, but if I say this, people will like me. People will listen to my Dharma teachings more, or whatever you're saying. If you're doing it in that way, then you're telling a lie, and that's actually the worst kind of lie. the lie about having supreme human qualities. For this reason, it's what's really important and really a sign of a true practitioner is that you never talk about your own experiences or qualities except with your gurus and your very close Dharma friends. You just don't speak about them. Keep your mouth shut. Just say, uh-huh. Now the other thing is when people say, have you had an experience of Mahamudra? And you kind of go, when it actually should have been, then that also can count as a lie. So the lies, although the nature of this of it is said in an earlier verse, it's said that the nature of the action of speech is words. Actually, they can also be done with the body, right? Similarly, you can also do the actions of body with speech, telling someone to go and kill someone, and then they go and do it. And you've committed that through your speech. That's your perceptible, right? Then it's also even possible to lie without acting either physically or verbally, without doing anything with your body or speech. For example, in some of the monastic rituals, the monastic sojong rituals that we do every 2 months, it says anyone who has the text reads, if anyone who has made a downfall, speak now, and if you don't speak now, then you are telling a lie. And if you just sit there and don't speak, knowing that you have had a downfall, then you've told a lie without doing anything. It's also said to be possible to kill without thinking, without doing anything physically or verbally, as in the example of the rishis who felt extreme fury and through the power of their minds killed all the sentient beings in what forest was it called? I can't remember the name of the forest. And so then there's a big description of how is that actually possible in the auto commentary in the Yashomitra. Basically, some people say that the rishis had this feeling, and then the non-human spirits realized that the rishis were feeling like this way, and then went and killed all the sentient beings. But at any rate, that's kind of a diversion. So it's even though we say that these are misdeeds of speech and of body, that's primarily body and speech. So at any rate, from all of this discussion, there's this discussion of lying as saying, I've seen something that I haven't seen, or I've heard something that I haven't heard, right? So then there's the question of, well, when you say seen, or heard, or cognized, or perceived. Now here, this is really hard in English because we use the words for sensing or perception and thinking differently than they do in Sanskrit. So that's what this next topic is discussing. The meaning of seeing, hearing, and so forth. This is basically describing the kind of different usages of the verbs to see, to hear, to be conscious of, and to sense or to realize or perceive. And it's hard to map them directly on. Seeing and hearing is easy, but the other two are not so easy to map directly onto English verbs. So that which is experienced by eye, by ear, mind, consciousness, and three is seen, heard, cognized, and perceived, respectively, it is explained. So here, that which is experienced by eye is that which is seen, right? That which is experienced by ear is heard. That which is experienced by mind consciousness is cognized. And that which is experienced by the other three senses, the nose, the tongue, and the body, is perceived, or you could say sensed. It's an interesting one. It's hard because you haven't got the same, it doesn't have the same connotations as the Sanskrit or the Tibetan words. But if you use, like the Tibetan word here is tokpa. This is tokpa as in the type of ratatatana dogasa tok. Now you all out there in Webland are getting Tibetan lessons today, so sorry about this. So this Tokpa, there are two words Tokpa. There's Tokpa as in Nambar Tokpa, as in thought, and there's Tokpa with a Sayanju, which is as in realization. Like when you say, realizing the nature of your mind, that's the Tokpa with the Sayanju, the one that's being used here. But it's also used in terms of perceiving things with your nose or tongue or body, particularly in texts that are translated from the Sanskrit, not so much in texts that are originally written in Tibetan or that aren't commenting on Sanskrit commentaries. So here it's that verb tokpa, which is used in the sense of perceived or to sense. So what are seeing, hearing, consciousness, and realizing, you say? Because these are the words that the Buddha used in the sutra. That which is experienced by the eye consciousness, and likewise by the ear consciousness, the mind consciousness, and by the three consciousnesses of nose, tongue, and body, is seen, heard, cognized, and perceived, respectively. It is explained. So you've got these three, and basically here, even though they go through a bit of discussion about why it is, we're just talking about how the words are used in Sanskrit. That's essentially what it's talking about. So the reason that scent, taste, and touch are taught in a single group is that they are similar in being only neutral. So they're never really, they're never virtuous, they're never unvirtuous, they're sensory consciousness, so they're always neutral. But that kind of seems a little bit strange. And so Master Sanghabhadra says they're similar in terms of being perceived on contact, that you actually have to have contact of the sensory faculty and the object of the senses, so they're presented in the same way. But there is a long discussion here on the auto commentary in Yashvamitra about the, what do we say? About the usage, and in particular about the usage of the word tokpa. And the variety of uses, and then the different positions that different masters have. So that is not for us to discuss today, because we're only doing we're doing more like the introductory level rather than the, full-on, heavy, complete Abhidharma, where it would probably take years to finish. Okay. Divisive speech. Divisive speech is words said with an afflicted mind to divide others. So divisive speech basically is what we're saying. It's saying things that are divisive, that in particular you've got two people who are too friendly with each other, you think, and you want to separate them. You want to make a rift between them. What is divisive speech, you ask? It is words whose meaning can be understood, that are unerringly said. If you say something that accidentally ends, if you're just saying something stupid and it ends up being divisive, that's not intended here. It has to be unmistaken and said with or motivated by an afflicted mind in order to divide others. That's what we mean by divisive speech. So it's to divide and not to help. It is not intended to help others. So you're basically saying that you're saying things to make trouble, basically, right? The next one, harsh speech. The words for harsh speech, this is the most common translation that I've seen for this term in English, but it also can be translated as insults. Insults. I've kind of been leaning towards changing it towards insults in the revisions of this text, but I don't know. Is harsh speech a little bit wider? Perhaps it is. Maybe that's why people say harsh speech. So harsh speech includes insults and anything else that's just said. Things that are said at a harsh, that unpleasant tone in order to hurt people. Harsh speech is words of an afflicted mind that are unpleasant, understandable, and unerring, which one actually says to another out of a desire to speak. So you're actually saying them on purpose. And if it's out of a desire to speak, I think this is probably excusing things like Tourette's syndrome, so that's probably not included. But harsh speech would be words that are just unpleasant to hear. So this is inappropriate language, harsh language that you're saying in order to hurt another being. This is what we mean by harsh speech. So that's 3 of the 4 of speech. And then we've got the last one, idle chatter. Now, when we say the word idle chatter, we think that to the English term, and also actually a little bit the Tibetan and the Tibetan term also kind of mean like you're just chatting. It's like you're chatting about nothing. It's not exactly chatting about nothing, really. Really what it means are words that are motivated, speech that is motivated by the afflictions. So as it says here, so there are 2 points to idle chatter. The actual says, any afflicted words are chatter. So any words you speak with a motivation that is afflicted comes under the category of idle chatter. Okay? Now, so any afflicted words spoken with an afflicted motivation are idle chatter. Now here it doesn't necessarily have to be understandable. Lying and the others are all 3 idle chatter, but because they're more harmful, they're classified separately. So in other words, idle chatter in this main presentation is like kind of the overall group that includes all afflicted speech, and then you've got lying, divisive speech, and harsh speech separated out because they are more bigger problems, right? So if you're just having idle gossip with a friend, you're talking out of some sort of a bad motivation. You know, it's kind of afflicted, you're talking about other people, but you're not really lying or saying afflicted, divisive or harsh speech, you're just gossiping. So that kind of falls under this rubric of idle chatter. And often, you know, so this would generally would also include things like flattery, buttering people up, speaking in ways to make yourself look bigger, you know, to get something, to make something good. So that's that all is included here. Now there are other ideas about what idle chatter is. So that's what the next section speaks about. Some say afflicted speech that's other than those, like flattery, songs, shows, or else bad treatises. So afflicted speech that's other than those 3. So some people say it doesn't include that idle chatter is a different category, so that you have 4 completely separate categories on the karmic path. Lying is 1, divisive speech and harsh speech, those are 3, and idle chatter is a separate one. So that's a different tradition. And then the examples they give are flattery, as I've just mentioned. So I'll just read the commentary, it'll make it easier. Some others say that afflicted speech that is other than those previous 3 are idle chatter. Like, for example, flattery spoken sweetly out of a desire for personal gain, honor, and fame. Singing songs out of desire. So if you're singing songs, Buddhist songs out of faith, you sing the songs of Milarepa. You sing. There are lots of nice Buddhist songs. There's the song for the Kunjasumgiyang, the melody of the 3 jewels, that lots of Tibetans and Chinese people love. There are all sorts of really nice Buddhist melodies, and if you're singing those out of faith, out of your own faith, to inspire faith, and so forth, and that's not included here, because that's not out of an affliction, that's out of faith, right? So it's not, because it's not afflicted, right? So that's songs. But if you're just singing songs in order to look good, or even worse, if you're singing songs in order to get something that you want, which we often do, you're singing your love song in order to seduce someone, right? That's afflicted chatter. Because it's coming out of greed or lust, you know. If you're singing songs to make yourself look like you're really big and bad, then, you know, that's that's idle chatter. Shows intended to make people laugh and so forth. So when you when you're doing these shows, then that would be included, considered idle chatter. It's It's just to entertain or light fluffiness. So, of course, these are things that we do all the time in worldly society, and maybe some people who shouldn't do them also do them too. But if you're doing it solely for the sake of laughter, Now, it's a little bit different if you're doing like something that's intended to educate. For example, the Ninth Karmapa often takes a great interest in theatrical performances and so forth, but he's doing it for a particular purpose of inspiring faith. Why did he put on the Milarepa play in Bodh Gaya on the coldest night of the year? And back, 10, 12 years ago? It was because he wanted people to feel faith when they saw and heard the life of Milarepa. It's like, so that's, of course, there were funny bits in it. There were sad bits in it. So you could say, oh, but that's making people laugh and so forth. But he did it with a Dharma purpose. So if you're doing it for the purposes of Dharma, it's different. Now, if you're just doing it to entertain, then it's a different matter. Or it is also like reciting bad treatises out of attachment to their erroneous views. So here it specifically mentions the treatises of the Vaisheshika, Nyayika, Mimamsaka, and other non-Buddhist schools, the Vedas and all that. It probably would include all sorts of other scriptures, so reciting those out of attachment to them. Why is this afflicted? It's because it's coming out of a wrong view, right? It's got the wrong view. Other words intended to bring fame and so forth are also idle chatter. So that's idle chatter. So those are the four of speech. And for many of us in the present day, these four of speech are the hardest ones to keep. They're the hardest ones to avoid. And in fact, that's not just now, it's probably been a long time, because when we talk about the lay precepts, the only one of these four that comes under the 5 lay precepts is the precept of lying. That's the most harmful of the precepts. But for people who are just going through an ordinary lay life, then this means the other 3 are not prohibited. But it does make it difficult. If you have the vow of not lying, sometimes it gets really hard to make jokes. Because normally, jokes are told with a little bit of an untruth, and that catching people on that dissonance between the untruth and the truth. And so it's really hard to make jokes and not, have a little, a little blemish on your vow against lying. So that just means that you have to just have absolutely no, well, I can't even say that. You can't even say that you should have no sense of humor, because what do you do? It means that the safest thing is to make jokes about yourself. If you make jokes about yourself without saying anything untrue about yourself, but just makes joke about yourself, then it's okay. Then you're fairly safe making jokes. When you're making jokes about other people, then you're really getting into dangerous territory. It's not like, when you read these things, it sounds like we're supposed to be even more dour than than what are they? What's that sect that is up in, even more dour than the Puritans? Okay, now we will talk about the 3 of karma, types of karma of mind. I can't keep it up for very long. Covetousness. Okay. To covet is wrongly greeding for others' wealth. Coveting is wrongly or inappropriately greeding for others' wealth that belongs to another. So greeding can be used as a verb. I looked it up when I used it in the translation. I had to make sure that I was actually writing grammatical English, although I avoided grammar in other sentences. In this one, I made sure that greeting is actually a verb before I wrote it down. So wealth that belongs to another. It is the desire to take something by force or thievery, or also by using words, finding some sort of a way to get it using, what do we say, using not necessarily false words, but twisting the words a little bit to get what you want. But someone else has something that you want, and you get it. So this comes out of greed, but it's that actually a little bit more active than greed. Malice is hate for sentient beings. So malice is hate for sentient beings that has an aspect of wanting to harm others. So you, excuse me. I mean, I don't know why I feel like I need to explain this. It's pretty clear, I think, mostly. Malice is like, you want to hurt, you want to cause harm to another sentient being. So that, what is that? Wrong view. So believing there's no virtue or non-virtue is wrong view. There are actually several types of wrong view here, and in the root text it just presents one of them. We talk about 5 different types of wrong views here. So virtue and no virtue. Saying that there's no virtue or no virtue doesn't mean that you're denying that people can be generous and so forth. Instead, you're denying that there's any point to being generous and so forth because you'd say they don't bring results. Believing that there is no virtue or non-virtue is like this, saying that there is no generosity, no burnt offerings, no fine conduct is denial of cause. So the denial of cause means saying all the things that we're talking about here, we're primarily talking about causes, right? The 10 karmic paths are talking about causes, whether they're virtuous or unvirtuous. They're causes of future results. And so saying that they are not causes, to say that, of course, it's good to be generous, it's good for society, but to expect something in a future lifetime, nah, it's not a cause. It's a good thing to do in society, but it's not a cause. So that's denying that. So burnt offerings are, in particular, I think, and from the Sanskrit, from the Indian tradition of making offerings. So any type of offering that you're making, or fine conduct or bad conduct. So basically saying that that these are not karmic causes, denying that they're causes, right? So that's the first one, denying the cause, denial of the cause. Saying there is no full ripening of the result of fine conduct and harmful conduct is the denial of result. So when we say that that there is no result to it, so the first is focusing on the cause. The first one does include fine conduct, only includes saying there's no fine conduct in the first one, but it can also say harmful conduct. The second one specifically says both fine conduct and harmful conduct, right? There's no full ripening of them, so that they will not produce a result. So the first is saying there's nothing to them. The second is saying that they will not, that there is no result of them. In other words, denying the full ripening of karma. Saying that this world, the next world, fathers, mothers, and miraculous birth of sentient beings do not exist is denial of function. So basically, this is saying that when you deny that this world is, that actually some of these are unclear and they're not explained at any great depth in Yashometra. Saying there's no world, I'm not sure who denies that there's a world. If you're living in the world, we think it's there. But saying that there is a next world, and I think maybe what it could mean, and this is a bit of a speculation, is denying that there's a world means denying that there's this world as being not the only one. Saying like this lifetime, as not, I'm not being clear, and I probably better just close my mouth before I say something completely wrong. So I'm not exactly certain what they mean by world here. But for the next world, it is clear that it means the next lifetime. So saying that there is no future lifetime, and by analog, also saying that there are no previous lifetimes. Fathers, mothers, and miraculous birth of sentient beings do not exist. So fathers and mothers is also not described in the commentaries, and I wonder if this means that they're like parents in other lifetimes. You know, generally most people will agree that there are parents in this lifetime. So are we denying that there will be parents in future lifetimes and that there have been parents in past lifetimes? That would also be a similar sort of denial. And I think probably it's talking about the future lifetimes and denying that there's a miraculous birth of sentient beings. So this would mean saying that there can't be anything like gods who are born miraculously. We see that everyone is born. So this is essentially saying that there are no realms of the gods, there are no realms of the hells, there are no realms of hungry ghosts. We don't see them, they're not there, there's no miraculous birth. You guys are talking about 4 types of birth, we only see 3. You're wrong about that one. And if you're denying that place of birth, then you're denying all the beings. So this is essentially saying no hells, no heavens, and all that. This is denial of function. Saying that there are no arhats in the loka. Loka is the Sanskrit word for world. And when Wangchuk Dorje specifically used this in his commentary in Tibetan, and so when he used the Sanskrit word in Tibetan, then I just used the Sanskrit word in English, but it means world. So basically saying that there's no arhat, and by extension also saying that there are no once-returners and non-returners. There's no results, results from the path. In the Mahayana, this would also include denying that there are bodhisattvas, or that there are Buddhas. That also is a type of wrong view. Saying there are no arhats in the loka is a view that destroys existing things. In other words, they're denying the existence of Buddhas and so forth. So these wrong views are really actually a very important thing for us who come from Western backgrounds to think about, because these many of them are talking about things that we don't grow up necessarily believing in. And so it's kind of hard when you grow up in either a secular or a Christian society and or what calls itself a Judeo-Christian society, but really kind of drops the Judeo as much as it can. But growing up in that traditional Western society, or getting a secular education, or coming from a humanist or a secularist point of view, these are the views that we are educated in from the time we go through schools. We're kind of taught that these things don't exist. And so it's difficult for us as coming from the Western background to actually develop real faith and real confidence in it. It's something we have to think about. I mean, if we don't really have confidence in, if you don't have confidence in past and future lives, then and in karmic cause and effect, if you deny the cause and result, or if you have doubt about cause and result, if you have doubt about past and future lives, but you're willing to give it the benefit of the doubt and work as if it's there, that's maybe not fully a bad view, but it's not wrong. Because then there's a chance if you come to have the understanding, yes, there really is at some point. And I think that's a reasonable way for people to start. If you say that there's none, then what's the point? Why would you do it? If you say there are no past and future lives. Well, if there's no past and future lives, then you're also denying that there are Buddhas. Because, I mean, the whole Buddhism is predicated upon past and future lives, karmic cause and effect. And so to think there are none, this is just something that was culturally appropriate or is culturally added on. It's not something that the Buddha taught. This is what some Western authors will say. They're trying to pick and choose the parts of the scriptures that they like and that fit their own beliefs. One of the great difficulties we have as Western Buddhists, we have a tendency, people want to say, we want Buddhism that speaks to us. We want Western Buddhism. We want American Buddhism, especially south of the border. In Canada, it's a little bit different, but in south of the border, you hear a lot of people say, we want contemporary, we want American Buddhism, Buddhism that we can relate to. And often what happens when we say we want that, then we say we want Buddhism that you take all the cultural aspects out of it. And then you have to decide what is culture and what is Buddhism. And that's a really difficult thing to say. And a lot of the things that people say is culture ends up being the things that don't agree with their own preconceived notions. So we want to have American Buddhism that gets rid of anything that doesn't fit our preconceived American ideas. And is that still Buddhism? So it's difficult. You can't really say. You're getting rid of the whole basic structure of how Buddhism works. It's all about karmic cause and effect. It's all about the fact that you can change what you are doing and the way you are thinking and achieve a result. It might take a while to get there, but you can do it. That's the whole point. And what's the point of doing this if you're just going to die and not, if we deny that there are results, then basically there's no point in doing any of it. We're all better off dying if we don't want to suffer, because then you'll stop suffering. And if you want to prevent other people from suffering, then you might as well go and kill them, because then they're not going to suffer anymore. And is that really compassionate activity? What's the point? If you want to save people suffering and you think that suffering is going to end at the moment of death, then we'll bring death on quickly. But do you really want that? So this is a really difficult thing. So why would we act in these ways if we don't believe? Why would we pursue Buddhism if we don't really? How can we perceive it? There are people who say, "Well, I just want to meditate on Mahamudra without accepting that there's karmic cause and effect, or without accepting that there's Buddhahood." Well, forget about the fact that Mahamudra is Buddhahood. How can you meditate on Mahamudra without meditating on Buddhahood if you say that there's no Buddhahood, right? It's denying that it's there. But there's that whole nature of what is the nature of mind? It's something that's unconditioned, but it's going to stop when you die. Then it's no longer unconditioned. So, you're deluding yourselves if you are thinking in this way. So, the point is that we have a sequence of causes and effects that we can see in the course of our daily lives. If you look at your mind, you can see that each moment of mind leads to the next moment of mind, and it doesn't stop. It keeps going all the time. And that sequence of mind can be independent of the body. It is often connected, but there's a difference between the activity that happens in the nervous system, particularly in the brain, and the conscious experience that we identify as mind when we look at ourselves in meditation. There are times when there is perception without any brain activity, as when people undergo cardiac arrest, and then they feel they have out-of-body experiences, and they float in the sky, and they watch the paramedics reviving their corpse. And then they're revived, and they go back in, and they tell people about this. So this happens not just once, but in many different instances. But they're watching their dead body being revived. So they're dead. The body is no longer functioning. The brain is no longer functioning. There's not that activity that we identify as that some people identify as being the causes of being consciousness itself. But it's not there, and yet they have conscious experience that matches up with what is actually happening according to other people's perception. So they have veridical experiences, and so how could they have those if the mind were just the activity in the brain? So it's separate. And because it's separate, it keeps going. It's a thing, like any other thing. As long as the causes and conditions for that brain, or for that mind, as long as the causes and conditions for the mind to continue are still going, that mind are present, that mind will keep going. And what's the primary cause and condition? It's our attachment. It's our craving. And that's what propels the mind from one moment into the next. We're attached to things. And so only when we break that cycle, through breaking the cycle of the 12 links of interdependence, is the mind then going to cease. And at that point, when mind ceases, the dualistic mind ceases, then you're either left with what we would call bodhi, or the absorption of cessation according to the great exposition tradition, or you just call just resting in the nature of Mahamudra. But in either case, you've got a situation where the mind continues as long as there is that craving, and as long as there is the ignorance and the imprints of ignorance that would cause the dualistic mind to continue. So it will not stop as long as those causes and conditions are there. And those causes and conditions are present in the very nature of the mind itself. So we know that so we can therefore prove that at the moment of death, is there still craving? Yes. There are people, and so at that moment, then you continue on to the next thing. We also have experiences of people who have died and then be revived. They're not just people who've undergone cardiac arrest. They're what we call in Tibetan delo, the people who've returned from the beyond. And there are also plenty. There's probably a shelf of books about this in your bookstore. You can go look at them if you want to. If you can go to a bookstore, I'm sorry. If you go to Amazon or to some other online bookseller, you can see them there too. But there's a lot of literature about it, not just Buddhist literature, in fact. So at any rate, that wrong view is something we really have to confront and think about. But it's not something that we can pretend. And I don't usually recommend people that thou shalt believe in karmic cause and effect. Thou shalt believe in past and future lives. Nay. No, it's not that thou shalt believe. You should think about it, and you should look at it, and you should be willing to confront your own cultural prejudices. There are lots of different American sects, Buddhist groups, and there's one of them that kind of came from the Tibetan origin. They say, we don't want to have anything Tibetan in our, so we're getting, that we'll have more, we won't have Tibetan decorations in our shrine, we'll do things like this. And then if you say to them, let's go out and do a song puja, they say, oh yeah, let's do song. What is song? Song is a Tibetan shamanist ritual. Now, there are many people in this organization who also say you don't need to believe in karmic cause and effect because that's cultural. But let's go have some song. Let's do a Tibetan ritual. So what are you giving up in the culture? The bits of culture that you don't like. Okay. Oh, I've got one more section I need to get through today. I better stop my rant before I really say something embarrassing. The distinction between karma and karmic paths. Of these, 3 are paths and 7 karma too. In the Tibetan there, does it say sum lam or sum mam? Mama mam. Sum mam or sum lam? Sum lam. Okay, because the Rangja says sum mam, but it should be sum lam. Lam is correct. So of these 10 karmic paths, we've just had the characteristics of all 10 non-virtuous karmic paths. So of them, 3 are only karmic paths, and so they're the last 3 of mind. As it says here, of these non-virtues, the 3 of mind are the gates to enter karmic volition. So they are karmic paths, but they are not karma. So when you have covetousness, for example, then the covetousness then kind of gets the volition going at the same time. That volition can then move and it can then engage in a way. And so in that way it is a karmic path. It causes the motion of volition. But they are not karma. They're not actual actions. So they're karmic paths, but not actions. And the 7 karmic paths of body and speech are karma of body and speech, so they are karmic paths and are karma too. So they are both. So they're actually, you can see when you do the act of killing, it's obviously killing, it's obviously an action. But at the same time, you have that volition of killing, and that volition is able to proceed and actually move towards and engage its object, the act of killing, because on the basis of the act of killing. So it is both the karma and the karmic path. So when we're talking about karmic path, we're primarily talking about the engagement of volition at that point. It's what gets it going. It's what makes it happen, what makes it going. So it's like a path because it is like the way you move. Okay. So that concludes our passage, the passages that we're going to cover today. So that's enough for now. And at this point, it would be, we should dedicate the virtue of teaching and listening to the Dharma to the benefit of all sentient beings, that all sentient beings may achieve the lasting happiness of Buddhahood and be freed from all temporary sufferings, in particular those sufferings that afflict them now, the direct sufferings of epidemic, the indirect sufferings of economic or other dislocation that have happened because of that, the sufferings of hunger, poverty, the sufferings that all animals and all other sentient beings, may those visible sufferings be completely pacified so that everyone experiences temporary pleasure until such a time as they achieve Buddhahood. O sanam de tam je simpani tobne ne bedranam pamchene gegana chibarla trobai Sibet sole drowan drolwan shom. Thank you.